Just how powerful has partisan warfare been in this conflict? We focused a lot on conventional fighting, but make no mistake, partisans operating behind Russian lines can make a huge difference. And we are going to show just why in this interview that Radio Free Liberty has got with a Russian partisan. Now, bear in mind, Radio Free Liberty, obviously a US funded news source, but generally Radio Free Liberty will tell true stories, obviously, that reflect favorably on their, U.S. policies. In this case, favorably on Ukraine. But I still believe, based on everything he says, that this is a true story. Let's get into it.
Я слышал по объездное движение техники. Это было 26 число.
So, this is, first off, this guy, if you were really a partisan, this is not how you would want to dress. And the reason I say that is because all black makes you look like a partisan. You're already a military-aged male, so already you are sort of higher on the radar in terms of the occupying forces who they consider a danger. Women, children, old men, old ladies, they're not considered a threat in the same way. Now, the reason he's wearing this is because he's being interviewed on camera, and black pants and a black shirt with no logos make it really hard to identify you. So I imagine that, given that he's still alive, that when he actually did his partisan operations, he wore the daily clothes that wouldn't look out of place in his city. He might wear a blazer and button-up in the office district. He might wear a soccer jersey and track pants near the park, right? You choose your outfit to blend in as much as possible with the ebb and flow of daily life. That's what makes a partisan so powerful, is that they are indistinguishable from a civilian.
26 число. И вот у меня получилось.
So, again, being an IT specialist, he was able to connect with the airport security cameras, which wasn't that hard. What he's trying to say is they had the default password, or their password was like 123 or something.
Подключиться к видео аэропорта, так как я айтишник, это не составило особого труда.
It's also possible, right? He says, I was an IT specialist. I easily connected to the airport security cameras. It's also possible he's literally the airport's IT specialist. That wouldn't shock me at all. And that, he simply left work one day when the occupying forces came in, but maintained the connection to the cameras. And that's something else to understand with partisan warfare, is that the most effective partisans use the skills and abilities and access that they already have to aid against occupying forces, right? This would be a great example. If he was the airport's IT guy, this would be the perfect way he could serve as a partisan supporter.
Смотрю, что на перроне, где мы на данный момент находимся, движение какой-то техники, фонари. Увидел даже не Z-ку, увидел.
And there you go, right down. He right away says, hey, I think I found some militarily relevant information.
Полосу, перпендикулярную полосу на технике, подумал, что-то не то.
Bingo. This, I think, if you don't understand anything else about partisan combat, this is one of the keys, is that sharing information on troop positions, troop deployments, troop movements, activities, this is invaluable to a military. Sometimes even so valuable that they will instruct partisans and tell them, hey, we actually aren't going to attack this target, because then the enemy will know that we are aware of it and watching it. And instead, they might say, hey, we want you to collect data on this target. What are the markings on the vehicles? How many vehicles are there? What kind of patches do those individuals wear? Because that helps the main force resisting the occupation, that helps them paint the larger picture. Just like any other sort of major operation, right? Each individual may not have the whole picture of what's going on, but somewhere Ukrainian intelligence was probably sitting there and going, hey, okay, we know that these 3 battalions of this Russian brigade are the reserve in Kherson, and we know where 2 of them are, but we don't know where the 3rd one is, and it could be reinforcing the place that we want to attack, but we need to know where the 3rd brigade is before we can launch our attack. Well, if a partisan calls and says, hey, I saw these trucks and they had a 3 on them, and the people using them had a patch that was like white and red, and it had like a a dragon on it, they might go, there it is. There's the 3rd brigade. We know they're not at this other critical point. We know we can launch our attack. Sometimes that is all it takes, even though literally that phone call could have just been a little old lady getting her groceries who said, I saw a lot more vehicles than usual, and this is what I read on them. It's funny how sometimes just a little thing can become a tremendously valuable source of information.
Нам скидували по всім новостним паблікам, що от якщо ви бачите рух якоїсь техніки, то звертайтеся за цим ботом. Буквально пройшло пару минуток, человек со мной связался, спросил.
That is really interesting too to me, that you can have an open social media account of someone who is going to be vetting and providing information. Now, as we've talked about, the Russian military is strapped for personnel. And so if they don't have enough personnel to staff their ground fighting units, they almost certainly don't have enough people behind the lines that would be responsible for things like intercepting civilians' radio communications. The fact is that Russia struggles to control the information space inside of its own country. And so there's almost no way that even relatively unsecured communications like this are going to be able to be intercepted, right? When you look at things like, Telegram or Signal or other difficult to intercept communication methods, you see how quickly it can become very hard to track how individuals are using. And as discussed, this guy is an IT professional, so he probably was able to implement a bunch more cybersecurity practices, like using a VPN, connecting to different Wi-Fi networks to pass along information. This is, when it comes to detecting partisans, it's really hard at baseline. It requires a lot of effort for a relatively small return. Look at the US, who, despite 20 years and over $1 trillion invested, were still unable to root out the Taliban partisan network completely. They remained deeply infiltrated in the Afghan military, the civilian bureaucracy, and in the population. And the US remained basically blind to their efforts, right? Every time they would take out one partisan, it felt like there would be 10 more that would be recruited. So all that to say, this is a good illustration of just how easy it can be to become a partisan.
Что происходит? Очень быстро. Это было так на адреналине, что-то новенькое, очень интересное. Тем более, это все-таки на благо дела.
Now, this is also fascinating because what else you can do from having an observation is you can get feedback on your efforts. For example, one of the biggest ones in Kherson was the use of HIMARS targeting Russian major logistics routes. These would be the handful of routes that allowed them to resupply their troops in the region. And so what you could do if you had internal access is you could launch HIMARS strikes and then rely on your partisan intelligence officials or your partisan intelligence network to tell you how effective they were. So, for example, you could sit there and go, hey, this person is near what we know as a supply depot. Tell us, how many trucks do you see leave the supply depot today, tomorrow, and the next day? Do they look full? And if the person says, hey, you're right, I didn't see a single truck leave the depot to supply the front lines today. Normally, there's like 6 that leave. that is evidence that your strikes are working and that you aren't wasting your resources. So again, this intel can be powerful to both guide military operations, but also to refine military operations. And the fact that he was given a drone implies that he has some sort of handler in Kherson that is a connection between this guy and the Ukrainian government. And that's usually how these sort of efforts will go, is frequently there will be a intelligence gathering individuals that will have a specific handler who then passes that information to the official military channels and in turn will distribute key oh my gosh, there's an acronym. It's like key questions they want answered, basically key pieces of intelligence that the headquarters wants to know and that they want their partisan networks to be on the lookout for. Again, that would be something like logistics, supply. How is it? Are Russian stores increasing or decreasing? Like we talked about, where is the 3rd Brigade? Those are questions that will get pushed down to reconnaissance elements to answer if at all possible.
Видно было, что стояла техника. Видно было количество не 10 штук. То есть вот так вот. И опять же скинули запись, скинули координат, где эта техника находилась.
Для нас, в принципі, відкриттям стало те, яких таких, знаєте,
This is interesting, right? So here is a good example, of a like we said, the headquarters, the handlers, the National Resistance Center is probably the hub for intelligence and efforts like this, where they probably either become digital handlers, where they will have a network of partisan contacts who feed information, and and physical handlers who are actually on the ground. They may also be a hub where the National Resistance Center will coordinate the efforts of 200 handlers who in turn each one of them has 10 to 15 partisans working for them.
Метричних прогресій набув підпільний рух. То якщо ми дійсно можемо сказати, що ми там запустили 10% того, що відбувається на тот, все інше це люди, які самі побачили, що можна робити.
So wait, I gotta translate this. We approved 10% of the initiatives offered by residents in occupied territories. Oh, okay. So actually, this is probably saying that many people approached the Ukrainian military and were like, I can do a lot of things for you. I suspect that many of them wanted to be the cool rogue. Some of them may have been actually like deluded and thought they were like going to be a one-man army against the Russian occupiers. And they were probably like, we have a multi-man army, so we're all good on one-man armies. Thanks, though. But, right. And he said people offered more after reading our instructions. What he's probably saying is that we started to message what it was we really needed partisans to do. And it's probably the things we just talked about, which is if you consistently report how many trucks leave the Russian base near your house every single day, that's worth 10 idiots trying to be one-man armies and getting killed, And so I think when they put out those instructions of like, this is what partisan work actually looks like, then people came in and said, there were probably less Rambos, and there were probably more people who are like, hey, my mom lives next to a major intersection, and she can see the port from her apartment. Do you want her to just tell you when ships come in? And they were probably like, yeah, we do. And your mom was a better partisan than the Call of Duty player.
Люди, які самі побачили, що можна робити, подивилися там на наші інструкції, на просто в соцмережах хто щось публікував, підхопили це.
And this is the other thing that's so powerful is when people self-organize. You would be shocked, and it can be really hard to dismantle networks like this when the networks sort of self-organize. Because again, if you have a closed cell of, let's say, 3 friends that always watch the Russian troop movements, then what you can get, even if Russia was to somehow detect those 3 friends, they're a self-organized, self-contained cell. You're never going to get, you'll get 3 friends and a phone number that they were texting their intelligence to, and that's it. You're not going to take down the entire partisan network because they're not networked. They're contained cells. It's really hard to dismantle, as US forces found in Iraq and Afghanistan, where you would take down a bomb-making cell and you would be like, it's 5 dudes and 1 number, and they literally never worked with another cell ever. They didn't even know they existed. There was almost no coordination. So it became so hard to dismantle self-organized cells.
Організувалися в якісь рухи, в організації.
Це референдуму, правильно було?
Да. Це активно.
Even some of this, right? This sounds like propaganda, and it kind of is, but it can really help people, first off, remain, even if it deters them from cooperation, reminding people that there are lots of Ukrainians out there who still believe in their country. Oftentimes, people are realistic and people are trying to survive. And if they believe that the Russian occupation is here to stay, then risking their lives to fight it, or even just remaining neutral and not collaborating, can seem like sort of pointless. So even these propaganda efforts, even if they hurt Russian morale a little bit and just keep other Ukrainians from collaborating actively, can make a big difference.
З ким ми якби активно працюємо, але не дуже верифікували, ми працюємо через Telegram. З ким ми вже довіряємо, там щось дійсно дуже серйозно потрібно провести. Наприклад, як тут намалювали там на стелі велику жовту стрічку, щоб це було абсолютно безпечно. Або підпалити білборд. То ми переходимо в більш захищені месенджери, як Signal, Trip.
Yep, just like we talked about. Initially, this is an interesting way of vetting resistance. Again, not just keeping out potential collaborators who want to infiltrate your organization, but also making sure you don't have people who are going to be a bigger liability. For example, let's say somebody said, oh, I want to bomb a coffee shop where I think Russians go. Well, you don't want the resistance to kill civilians. That's a bad look unless you're the Taliban. So they might say, no, listen, we just want you to paint the yellow ribbon and burn a billboard. Can you follow simple directions? Listen, I'm here to tell you guys, if you ever done any hiring, you know, follow simple written directions. You might as well be trying to find the next Michael Jordan, because so many people cannot do that effectively. But those that can probably get brought into a low level of the network.
Нарушено все. Але отак. Під другою
кульочку?
плиткою. Так.
Це щоб не намок?
Так, а він все рівно намок.
Yeah, but it got wet anyhow. Yeah,
По
right.
принципу, ти можеш чинити спротив там, де ти це можеш робити найкраще. Тобто, якщо людина
Yeah. Okay, listen to this. He's communicating better than our way that's most effective for you, right? Base hits. That's the winning principle for being a partisan. The thing somewhere out there is the thing that is best, that will be so easy, it barely feels like helping. But like the IT guy, it probably felt stupid to just be like, log into the cameras once a day and count the vehicles. Probably felt like he was barely helping. But he may have been a game changer for the Ukrainian armed forces in painting their intelligence pictures.
робити найкраще. Тобто, якщо людина могла і вміла правильно відслідкувати техніку і правильно вказати інформацію, це могли зробити. Якщо людина мала сміливість, хоробрість і, головне, могла свою безпеку убезпечити себе і вийти на вулиці, намалювати жовто-блакитні прапори, теж люди могли це робити. І водночас є ще одна складова нашої роботи, яка називається саботаж. Тобто це люди, які лишилися в окупованих містах, працювали.
And you're right, sabotage is also an example, but sabotage is really hard, right? And the reason it's so difficult is because of the preparation and because of the militarization it requires, right? You're required to keep explosives and munitions at your house potentially. That itself is hard. It's hard to get close enough to the Russian military to affect those operations, though it's really common actually to see partisan activity target soft targets. So instead of blowing up a Russian tank, you might blow up rail lines that the Russians are using to bring their equipment into the region. But even blowing them up is probably secondary. Even if all you do is go out with a wrench and remove a train track, right? That can still cause a massive problem. If you derail a train, that is a tremendous, tremendous victory. Especially if all you did it with was a wrench or an acetylene torch. So that is, again, the best partisan resistance is the stuff that you can do easily. And people don't think creatively enough sometimes about what it means to be a partisan and how you can disrupt efforts.
Там і працюють, і так чи інакше можуть нашкодити ворогу.
As we talked about, that's super important. They shouldn't know each other. Why is VOA giving out hot tips for guerrilla warfare? I don't know, but I'm here for it.
Когда ты вот таким путем занимаешься, то ты не чувствуешь вину особо, что ты там кого-то убил или там с твоей помощью убили. Ну, когда прилетало, конечно, радовались. Все радовались, соседи радовались, все выбегали, все радовались. Ну, соседи радовались просто потому, что прилетело, а ты радовался
Okay, that's pretty funny. Rushing out to cheer.
что ну,
Nice.
думал, считал, что хоть какую-то капельку ты помощи внес в это все.
And right, just like the Taliban, there are some that are out there really putting out oh man, what's the non-demonetized word? They are reducing the number of collaborators. And this is the other thing. Officials and collaborators oftentimes aren't military. This was a classic Taliban move, is to find civilian governors or vice governors and target them for quick removal. And it's, again, hard, but they realized over time, right, the Taliban, the Iraqi insurgents, and these partisans here learned from that your best bet is to go after those soft targets. Let the armed forces with the heavy weapons deal with the enemy's armed forces and heavy weapons. Because ultimately, as we've talked about in this whole channel, warfare is a collaborative effort, and it requires civilian officials. It requires boring movement. It requires trains of food. All of those things are as much a part of warfare as weapons and explosives and munitions. And that's what makes partisans so powerful, is they make areas that were supposed to be safe and sound, they turn them into a part of the battlefield. And that can totally change the way a military fights. One last pointer that I think is actually pretty important in this whole thing is that when you have a military changes the way it deploys its forces if it no longer believes its rear areas are safe. Suddenly, convoys need guards. Suddenly, you have to fly your drones over behind the line roadways and railways to make sure they haven't been destroyed. Sometimes just one little thing can change the way your enemy, your occupying military operates, and can draw combat power away from the front lines. And that in and of itself is huge. It's why the US, despite having a massive military, was unable to stop the Taliban, because it's literally so resource intensive to try to patrol every road, everywhere, all at once. And that's the power of a partisan. Anyway, guys, thanks so much. If you want access to the combat videos that are too intense for YouTube, you want to become a member of the Patreon. The new video just dropped today or yesterday. Link is in the description. Thanks to my lieutenant to your patrons. I'll see you all in the next one.